The Swarovski crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the most powerful faces in Manhattan as Victoria Chen Knight reached for her Hermes clutch. In exactly 30 seconds, her entire world would shatter into a million pieces, but she didn't know that yet. All she knew was that her wallet wasn't where it should be. "Alexander," she whispered to her husband, who was deep in conversation with Senator Morrison about a billion-dollar infrastructure deal. "I think I left my wallet in the car." The transformation was instant. Alexander Knight's steel-gray eyes went from charming to arctic in a heartbeat. The temperature in the private dining room of Le Bernardin seemed to drop 10 degrees as he slowly turned to face his 7 months pregnant wife. His jaw clenched in that way she'd learned to fear over the past months, the telltale sign that his carefully constructed mask was about to slip. "What did you just say?" His voice was dangerously quiet. Victoria felt the first flutter of unease. Around them, New York's elite continued their conversations, unaware that they were about to witness the complete destruction of the city's golden couple. Mayor Richardson was laughing at something the police commissioner had said. Margaret Worthington, the grand dame of Manhattan society, was discussing her latest charity initiative with the governor's wife, whose 60th birthday they were celebrating tonight. Judge Harrison was sampling the foie gras. None of them noticed the storm brewing at table 7. "My wallet," Victoria repeated, trying to keep her voice steady. "I must have left it in the Tesla when—" "You forgot your wallet." Alexander stood slowly, and Victoria noticed how conversations around them began to die like dominoes falling. "To the charity gala, where you're supposed to bid on the auction items for pediatric cancer research. With whose money exactly?" The irony wasn't lost on her. Pediatric cancer research, while her husband's factories caused actual pediatric cancer. But she couldn't say that. Not yet. She'd kept his secret for 3 months, waiting for the right moment. This wasn't it. "Alexander, please, not here." "Not here?" The explosion came without warning. What happened next would be replayed millions of times on social media. Someone's phone captured every second. Alexander Knight, billionaire CEO of Knight Industries, reached across to the dessert table and grabbed the 5-tier birthday cake, a $10,000 masterpiece of French pastry and edible gold leaf, meant to celebrate Governor Morrison's wife's 60th birthday. His movements were swift, violent, purposeful. Time seemed to slow. Victoria saw the cake coming, saw the horror dawning on faces around her, heard someone scream. She instinctively turned, trying to protect her stomach, but the cake hit her with the force of Alexander's rage. 5 tiers of chocolate ganache and buttercream exploded across her custom Valentino maternity gown, across her swollen stomach where their twins were kicking in distress, across her face and perfectly styled hair that had taken 3 hours at Bergdorf's salon. The impact knocked her back. She stumbled, her Louboutin heel catching on the Persian rug. For a terrifying moment, she thought she might fall, might hurt the babies, but strong hands caught her. Judge Harrison's wife, a woman who'd delivered 3 children of her own, held her steady. "My God," someone whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. 200 of New York's most powerful people frozen in a tableau of shock. Senator Morrison with his mouth hanging open, his forgotten champagne glass tilting dangerously. Mayor Richardson with a piece of Wagyu beef suspended halfway to his mouth. Margaret Worthington clutching her pearls with one hand and her heart medication with the other. The governor's wife staring at the destroyed remains of her birthday cake, now decorating a pregnant woman like some grotesque art installation. "That's what happens when you embarrass me in public," Alexander's voice thundered across the dining room. His face was twisted into something Victoria had only seen in private before, the monster behind the magazine covers. "Did you really think you could humiliate me by making me pay for your mistakes? You're nothing without me, Victoria. Nothing but a middle-class nobody playing dress-up in clothes I bought you." The words hit harder than the cake. Because 6 months ago, they would have been true. 6 months ago, she'd been a pediatric surgeon living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, taking the subway to work, wearing scrubs more often than designer dresses. 6 months ago, she'd been happy, before Alexander Knight had walked into her life and systematically destroyed everything she was. Victoria stood there, chocolate dripping down her face, mixing with tears she refused to let fall. Her hands went protectively to her stomach, where she could feel the twins moving frantically, as if they could sense their mother's distress. The room spun slightly, and she gripped the edge of a chair for support. Judge Harrison's wife hadn't let go of her arm, a silent sisterhood in the face of masculine violence. But as she steadied herself, something extraordinary happened. The trembling stopped, the tears dried, and Victoria Chen Knight, the woman who'd spent 6 months slowly drowning in her husband's escalating abuse, finally reached her breaking point. She thought of the evidence hidden in her cloud storage, the videos she'd secretly recorded, the documents she'd photographed, the truth about Knight Industries that could destroy everything. She thought of her brother Marcus, sweet, nervous Marcus who'd called her crying 3 months ago, who'd confessed to helping Alexander cover up the Riverside contamination because Alexander had threatened to destroy his importing business if he didn't. Marcus, who was now in hiding, terrified of what Alexander might do if he found out he'd told Victoria everything. She thought of the families in Riverside, the children in the cancer ward, the mothers who would never see their babies grow up, all because her husband valued profit over lives. The anger started in her chest, a small flame that suddenly roared into an inferno. She wiped chocolate from her eyes with the napkin Judge Harrison's wife offered, and when she looked up, everyone in the room took a collective step back, because Victoria Chen Knight was smiling, and it was terrifying. "Security footage," she said so quietly that people leaned forward to hear. "From your office." Alexander's sneer faltered. "What?" "March 15th, 2:47 a.m. You and Marcus Chen destroying hard drives, burning documents. I have it all, Alexander." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "Every crime, every cover-up, every life you destroyed for profit. You're delusional." But his voice had lost its thunder. "The stress of pregnancy, evergreen manufacturing." She pulled out her phone, ignoring the chocolate still dripping from her hair. "Riverside, Pennsylvania, population 8,742. 43 cases of pediatric cancer in a town that should statistically have 2. 12 deaths. All children under 10. And you knew. You've known for 3 years." The color drained from Alexander's face so fast Victoria thought he might faint. Around them, phones were coming out, the social media vultures smelling blood in the water. Someone whispered, "Is she serious?" Another said, "Riverside, that's where the Hendersons live before their daughter." "Victoria," his voice cracked, "don't do this." "Don't do what? Tell the truth?" She laughed, and it was a broken sound. "You just threw a cake at your pregnant wife in front of 200 witnesses because I forgot my wallet. You think I have anything left to lose?" She turned to address the room, wiping frosting from her eyes with as much dignity as she could muster. The cream filling had gotten into her hair, making it stick to her neck. Her designer dress was destroyed. She looked like the victim of a food fight, but her voice was steel. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for ruining your evening. But since my husband decided to make this public, let me share something else public. Knight Industries has been poisoning children for profit, and I have proof." "Stop!" Alexander lunged for her phone, but Victoria had learned to anticipate his moves. 6 months of dodging his temper had taught her well. She sidestepped him, her hand already hitting send on an email she'd hoped never to use. Too late. Every major news outlet now has copies of everything. CNN, Fox, The Times, The Post, financial records showing bribes to EPA officials, medical reports your company suppressed, emails where you joke about, her voice broke slightly, about acceptable losses being cheaper than cleanup costs. "You stupid bitch!" Alexander's mask finally shattered completely. "You've just destroyed your children's inheritance, their legacy. Their father is a murderer." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "That's their legacy, Alexander, unless I stop it here, tonight." Margaret Worthington was the first to move. The 70-year-old philanthropist, whose own granddaughter had died of leukemia, walked directly to Victoria and handed her a cloth napkin. Real linen, not paper. Even in crisis, Margaret Worthington had standards. "Clean yourself up, dear," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Then tell us everything." Mrs. Worthington. "My Amy died last year. 7 years old, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. We lived near one of your factories, Mr. Knight." Margaret's voice could have frozen hell. "In Riverside, so yes, Mrs. Knight. Tell us everything." The room erupted. Suddenly everyone had a connection. A friend who'd lived in Riverside. A colleague whose child had gotten sick. A charity they'd supported for pediatric cancer that had seen unusual spikes in certain areas. Areas that Victoria now realized all had one thing in common: Knight Industries facilities. But before Victoria could speak, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way Alexander's face suddenly shifted from rage to something else. Fear? "Hello, Victoria." The voice was electronically distorted. "Impressive performance. But if you say another word, your twins will never take their first breath. Look at your husband's hand." Alexander was holding his own phone, showing a live video feed. Victoria's blood turned to ice. It was the interior of her car, the white Tesla Model X she'd driven here tonight, the one she'd claimed to have left her wallet in, the one that should be empty in the valet lot. But it wasn't empty. There was a device attached to the steering wheel. Professional, military grade, and most terrifying of all, red LED numbers counting down. 300, 299, 298. 5 minutes, the voice continued. Keep talking and boom. Walk away now and the timer stops. Your choice, their lives or your revenge. Victoria looked at the screen, at her husband's face, which had gone from triumphant to horrified. He was staring at the phone like he'd never seen it before. "This isn't me," he whispered. "Victoria, I swear this isn't—" "Shut up, Alexander," the electronic voice commanded. "Or should I tell everyone about Singapore, about what really happened to your first wife?" First wife? Victoria's head spun. Alexander had been married before? The room was in chaos, people calling 911, security trying to evacuate, but Victoria stood frozen, staring at the countdown. 297, 296, 295. "Tick-tock, Victoria," the voice said. "What's it going to be? Justice for dead children or the lives of your own?" Judge Harrison was already on the phone with the police. "Bomb threat at Le Bernardin. We need the bomb squad." "They won't make it in time," the voice interrupted, somehow speaking through Victoria's phone loud enough for everyone to hear. "And if anyone leaves the building, it detonates immediately. You're all staying for the show." Victoria's mind raced. Who was doing this? Who knew about Alexander's crimes but wasn't on her side? Who had access to military explosives? Who knew about a first wife she'd never heard of? Then she saw it, in the corner of the video feed, a reflection in the car window, a partial logo she recognized, Chen Imports, her brother's company. "Marcus?" she breathed. The electronic laugh that came through the phone made her skin crawl. "Smart girl. Too smart for your own good. Just like you were too smart to leave well enough alone." "Marcus, what are you doing? This isn't what we planned. Plans change, sister. You were supposed to take the money and disappear. Start a new life. Raise your babies somewhere safe. But no, you had to be the hero. Had to get justice. Well, here's justice for you. 290, 289, 288. Victoria felt the twins kick hard. Her babies, Alexander's babies. Whatever their father had done, they were innocent. They deserved a chance at life. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want you to understand something," Marcus's distorted voice replied. "Alexander didn't corrupt me. I corrupted him. Who do you think came up with the Riverside cover-up? Who found the officials to bribe? Who made the problems disappear? Your perfect husband might be a monster, but I'm the one who taught him how to hide the bodies." The room had gone silent. Everyone listening to family drama that had suddenly become more terrifying than corporate crime. Alexander was staring at Victoria with something like dawning horror. "Your brother," he said slowly. "Your brother is—" "The real villain of this story," Marcus finished. "Surprise plot twist. The loving brother was the mastermind all along, and now he's cleaning house, starting with you two. 285, 284, 283. "But why?" Victoria whispered. "Because Alexander was getting sloppy, getting emotional. Falling in love with you made him weak. He wanted to come clean. Can you imagine? 5 years of perfect crime and he wants to confess because his wife makes him want to be a better man. It would have been touching if it wasn't so pathetic." Alexander made a sound like he'd been punched. You were the one who said to marry her, said it would look good for the company. I said to marry someone respectable, not to fall in love with her, not to put babies in her, and definitely not to develop a conscience. Marcus's voice hardened. You were supposed to be my puppet, Alexander, my perfect front man, handsome, charming, believable, while I pulled the strings from the shadows. 280, 279, 278, 6 months earlier, Mount Sinai Hospital, 2:47 a.m. The emergency department was in controlled chaos. A multi-car pileup on the FDR Drive had brought in 17 casualties in the last hour. The helicopter pad hadn't stopped spinning as life flight brought in the critical cases. The trauma bays overflowed with the broken and bleeding while exhausted residents ran on adrenaline and too much coffee. Victoria Chen was elbow-deep in a patient's chest cavity when she heard the commotion. Where is he? Where's my nephew? The voice cut through the emergency department like a thunderclap. Even over the beeping monitors, the crying families, the shouted medical orders, that voice commanded attention. It was a voice used to being obeyed, a voice that had never heard the word no. Can someone deal with that? Victoria muttered, not looking up from the delicate work of repairing a lacerated artery. Jenkins, more suction. I can't see anything. Through the observation window, she caught a glimpse of the source. Alexander Knight. Even at 3 in the morning, even in crisis, the man looked like he'd stepped off a magazine cover. The Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The perfectly styled hair that somehow remained perfect, despite what must have been a panicked rush to the hospital. The kind of masculine beauty that made nurses walk into walls. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Wild. Desperate. The eyes of a man on the edge of losing everything. Sir, you need to check in at... A security guard moved to intercept him. Tommy Knight, 3 years old. They said he was brought here. Alexander's voice cracked, shattering the facade of control. Car accident. His nanny. They said his nanny was driving and there was a truck and... Trauma Bay 3, someone called out. But you can't. Alexander was already moving, pushing past security with the kind of determination that built billion-dollar empires. Victoria sighed. Great. Just what she needed. A hysterical relative contaminating her OR. Dr. Chen? Jenkins looked at her nervously. Should I call security? Finish closing here, I'll handle it. She stepped back from the table, letting her senior resident take over. And Jenkins? Try not to kill anyone while I'm gone. She stripped off her bloody gloves and gown as she walked, washing her hands in the hallway sink. Through the trauma bay doors, she could see Alexander Knight arguing with 3 nurses and 2 security guards. Even in crisis, the man commanded the space, making everyone else seem small by comparison. Don't care about your protocols, he was saying. That's my nephew in there, the only family I have left. If you think some minimum wage rent-a-cop is going to keep me from Mr. Knight. Victoria's voice cut through his tirade like a scalpel. He turned, and for a moment they just stared at each other. The billionaire in his perfect suit and the surgeon in her rumpled scrubs. The master of the universe and the woman who held his universe in her hands. I'm Dr. Chen. I'll be performing Tommy's surgery. Surgery? The word came out strangled. How bad is it? Can I see him? Please, I need to... Internal bleeding, lacerated spleen, possible liver damage, 3 broken ribs, collapsed lung. Victoria kept her voice clinical. She'd learned long ago that in moments like this, facts were kindness. False hope was cruelty. I need to get in there now. The longer we wait... I'm coming with you. No, you're not. She was already moving toward the OR. You'll wait outside like every other family member. Do you know who I am? Victoria stopped, turned, fixed him with a look that had made grown men cry. You're a man whose nephew needs emergency surgery. Your name, your money, your power mean nothing in my OR. What matters is that I saved that little boy's life, and I can't do that with you breathing down my neck. I need to see him, before the words caught in his throat. In case. Something in his voice made Victoria pause. She'd seen 1,000 family members in crisis, but there was something different here, a rawness that money couldn't mask. She'd read about Alexander Knight, of course. Everyone had. The orphan who'd built an empire, the man who'd turned childhood trauma into billions, the CEO who treated emotions like weaknesses and weaknesses like death. But the man in front of her wasn't a CEO. He was just a terrified uncle about to lose the only family he had left. 30 seconds, she said against her better judgment. Then you get out of my way and let me save his life. She led him to Trauma Bay 3. The little boy on the gurney was so small, dark hair matted with blood, oxygen mask obscuring half his face, machines beeping frantically. The damage was worse than she'd let on, the chances grimmer. But Alexander Knight didn't need to know that. Tommy! Alexander made a sound like a wounded animal. Oh, God, Tommy. He can't hear you. We've sedated him. Victoria checked the monitors, BP dropping, heart rate erratic. They needed to move now. Say what you need to say. Alexander leaned down, his large hand impossibly gentle on the boy's forehead. The contrast was striking. This titan of industry reduced to a trembling man by a 3-year-old's bedside. Hey, buddy, Uncle Alex is here. You're going to be okay. You have to be okay. His voice broke completely. You're all I have left, Tommy. Everyone else is gone. Mom, Dad, Sarah. I can't lose you too. Please don't leave me. Please. He pressed his forehead to the boy's tiny hand. Victoria saw his shoulders shake. Alexander Knight, the man who hostile takeovered Fortune 500 companies before breakfast, was crying over a little boy. Time's up. Victoria signaled the OR team. Get him up to OR 3, now. As they wheeled Tommy away, Alexander grabbed her arm. His grip was desperate. Save him, please. I'll give you anything, any amount of money. I'll fund your research, build you a hospital, anything. I don't want your money, Mr. Knight. She shook him off. I want you to get out of my way and let me do my job. She was halfway to the OR when he called out. His blood type is 1-gative. He's allergic to penicillin. His favorite toy is a stuffed dinosaur named Rex. He's afraid of the dark, so we leave a nightlight on. He likes to be sung to when he's scared. Twinkle, twinkle, little star. His mom used to... The words choked off. His mom used to sing it to him, before the accident. Before I failed her, too. Victoria turned back. Alexander Knight stood in the middle of the trauma bay looking utterly lost. His perfect suit was wrinkled now. His perfect hair mussed. His perfect facade cracked wide open. I'll save him, she said, and meant it. How can you know that? Because I'm very good at what I do, Mr. Knight, and because that little boy has someone who loves him waiting outside. That matters more than you'd think. She left him standing there and entered OR 3. Her team was already prepped. The anesthesiologist looked grim. How bad? Victoria asked, scrubbing in. Worse than we thought. The liver's barely hanging on. And the spleen? He shook his head. If he were an adult, I'd say 5% chance. But he's 3, so we work miracles. That's what we do here. She finished scrubbing. What's his name again? Tommy Knight, as in Knight Industries, as in our new cardiac wing is the Knight Wing, as in he's a 3-year-old boy who needs our help. Victoria moved to the table. Scalpel. The surgery took 4 hours and 37 minutes. 4 hours of delicate work repairing damage that would have killed an adult in minutes. 4 hours of fighting for a little boy whose uncle was probably wearing a hole in the waiting room floor. The spleen was unsalvageable. She removed it, knowing it would leave him vulnerable to infections for the rest of his life, but alive to have a rest of his life. The liver was touch and go. 3 times they almost lost him. 3 times Victoria refused to let him go. Come on, Tommy, she murmured as she worked. Your uncle's waiting for you. He seems like the stubborn type, probably won't leave until you wake up. So let's not keep him waiting too long, okay? The worst was the tear in the hepatic artery. One wrong move and he'd bleed out in seconds. Victoria's hands were rock steady as she sutured. Years of training had prepared her for this moment, but it was thinking about the broken man in the waiting room that gave her the extra edge. The way he'd said please, the way he'd touched the boy's forehead, the way love had stripped away everything else until only desperation remained. Got it, she said as the last suture went in. He's stable. Let's get him closed up. The relief in the room was palpable. Her team had been holding their breath for 4 hours. Now they could finally exhale. Nice work, Dr. Chen, the anesthesiologist said. That was not over yet. He's got a long recovery ahead. The next 24 hours are critical. But she allowed herself a small smile. But yeah, Nice work, everyone. When she finally emerged from surgery, exhausted but victorious, Alexander was exactly where she'd expected, pacing, still in his now thoroughly wrinkled suit. He looked up when he heard her footsteps, and she saw something she'd never forget. Pure, naked hope battling absolute terror. "He's stable," she said immediately before he could ask. "We repaired the internal bleeding, saved the liver. Had to remove his spleen, but that's manageable. His vitals are good. He's a fighter, Mr. Knight, just like his uncle, apparently." Alexander's legs gave out. He dropped into a plastic chair that probably cost less than his shoes and put his head in his hands. His shoulders shook. He was crying. Really crying. Not the controlled tears of a man who'd learned to perform grief, but the raw sobs of someone who'd just stepped back from the edge of an abyss. Victoria should have walked away. She had other patients, other surgeries, but something made her sit down beside him. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the way, even broken, he still looked like a fallen angel. Maybe it was that she'd just spent 4 hours inside his nephew's chest cavity and felt oddly connected to this little family's drama. "He really is going to be okay," she said softly. "His mother, my sister, she died 2 years ago." The words came out muffled, broken. "Car accident. Just like God, just like this. She was coming home from my birthday party. I'd insisted she come even though the weather was bad. If I'd just let her stay home." "You can't think like that." "Can I?" He looked up and his gray eyes were swimming. "Everyone I love dies in car accidents. My parents when I was 8, my sister 2 years ago, and now Tommy. Tommy didn't die. He's upstairs sleeping off anesthesia, probably dreaming about that dinosaur Rex." Alexander laughed, but it was a broken sound. "I gave him that dinosaur. Sarah said I was spoiling him, but I couldn't help it. He's so much like her. Same stubborn streak, same smile, same—" His voice broke again. "I was supposed to protect him. I promised Sarah I'd protect him. You couldn't have prevented this. I could have been there. Should have been there. But I had a meeting. A fucking meeting about some acquisition that doesn't even matter. And I let the nanny drive him to preschool because I had to close some deal that—" He slammed his fist into the armrest. "I wasn't there. Just like I wasn't there for Sarah. Just like I wasn't there for my parents. Your parents' accident. You were 8. What could you have done? Been with them. Died with them. Instead of being left behind. Instead of spending 27 years wondering why I survived and they didn't." The words hung between them. Victoria had seen survivor's guilt before, but this was different. This was a man who'd built an empire on the foundation of loss, who'd turned grief into billions but never bothered to actually process the grief. "Is that what you think Tommy should do?" she asked. "If you had died in that car, should he spend his life wondering why he survived and you didn't?" Alexander went very still. That's exactly what it is. Survivor's guilt doesn't honor the dead, Mr. Knight. It just dishonors the living." She stood. "Your nephew is going to need you, not your money, not your guilt. You, present, engaged, teaching him that surviving isn't a sin." "I don't know how to do that." "Then learn. You learned how to build a billion-dollar company. I think you can figure out how to be present for a 3-year-old. He stood too. Even exhausted, even broken, he towered over her. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone who'd be impressed, or intimidated, or at least polite. You just told me off, twice, while I'm in the middle of—" "A crisis?" "Yes, because someone needs to. I'm guessing most people tell you what you want to hear. Most people tell me what they think I want to hear. There's a difference. Is there? You tell me. What do you think I want to hear right now?" Victoria considered. "That Tommy will be fine. That none of this was your fault. That money can fix everything. That you're a good uncle doing your best." "And what are you actually telling me?" "That Tommy will recover with proper care. That fault is less important than what you do next. That money can't fix everything, but it can provide excellent medical care. And that being a good uncle means showing up, especially when it's hard." "Especially when it's hard," he repeated. "My sister used to say something similar." She sounds like she was smart, brilliant, kind, everything I'm not. He rubbed his face. When can I see him? Tommy? He'll be in recovery for another hour, then pike you. You can see him briefly then, but he needs rest. And Mr. Knight? He's going to look bad. Tubes, wires, machines. It's normal, but it can be shocking. I don't care how he looks. He's alive, that's all that matters. Victoria started to leave, then turned back. For what it's worth, the way you knew about the nightlight and the song, that's not nothing. That's love, and that's what he's going to need most. 3 hours later, she was grabbing her fourth espresso when she saw him again. He was standing outside the PCU window staring at his nephew. Tommy was tiny in the hospital bed, dwarfed by machines, but his color was good, his vitals stable. He looks so small, Alexander said without turning. All kids look small in hospital beds. It's the adult-sized equipment. She stood beside him. He's doing well, better than expected, actually. When will he wake up? Few hours, maybe more. His body's been through trauma. It needs time to heal. I'll wait. You should go home, get some rest, shower, eat something that isn't from a vending machine. I'll wait, he repeated. Have dinner with me. The words hung in the air. Victoria blinked. I'm sorry? When this is over, when Tommy's better, have dinner with me. He must have seen her expression because he rushed on. Not as a thank you, not as Alexander Knight, CEO of anything, just as the guy whose nephew you saved, as someone who'd like to talk to someone who sees him as human. Mr. Knight. Alex. Alex. The name felt strange on her tongue. Intimate. I don't date patients' families, it's complicated. Ethical boundaries. One dinner. Somewhere normal. No five-star anything. Just food and conversation with someone who doesn't want something from me. He paused. Unless you're married, or involved, or just finding a polite way to say you're not interested in, I'm not married. Why did she say that? But this isn't a good idea. Most of my best decisions have been bad ideas. Tommy's mom used to say I was too careful, too controlled, that I'd scheduled my whole life and forgotten to live it. His smile was sad. She was right. I scheduled everything except the things that mattered. Victoria knew she should say no. Every rational part of her brain was screaming warnings. Alexander Knight was dangerous, not because he was powerful or rich, but because she could see the pain under the armor, the humanity he tried so hard to hide. She'd always been drawn to broken things. It's what made her a great surgeon. It's also what made her terrible at relationships. One dinner, she heard herself say, after Tommy's discharged, somewhere normal. Normal? He said it like it was a foreign word. I can do normal. But they both knew even then it would never be just dinner. Standing in that hospital corridor at 6 in the morning, watching a little boy breathe, they both knew they'd already crossed a line. The doctor who'd lost a brother, the billionaire who'd lost everyone, brought together by a 3-year-old's tragedy. It should have been a warning. Instead, it felt like fate. Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn. Alexander showed up in jeans and a simple button-down, looking uncomfortable but determined. Victoria had never seen him photographed in anything but designer suits. You own 7 restaurants in Manhattan, she said as they sat down at a checkered tablecloth. Why here? Because you said somewhere normal. My assistant had to Google what that meant. He looked around at the cozy family-owned restaurant. Is this normal? Victoria laughed, and something in Alexander's chest tightened at the sound. It's perfect. Do you even know how to read a menu that doesn't have foie gras on it? I'm a quick learner. Over pasta and cheap wine, Alexander found himself telling Victoria things he'd never told anyone. About growing up in foster care. About building his empire from nothing. About the sister he'd failed to save and the nephew he was terrified of failing too. Tommy's all I have left of her, he said, staring at his untouched tiramisu. I've made billions, but I couldn't save the one person who mattered. What kind of man does that make me? Victoria reached across the table and took his hand. A human one. You can't control everything, Alexander. Life doesn't work that way. I've spent 15 years proving that wrong. And how's that working out for you? All that control? He looked at their joined hands. Her fingers were small but strong surgeon's hands that saved lives while his just moved money around. Not as well as I thought. They talked until the restaurant closed, about medicine and business, about loss and hope, about everything and nothing. When Alexander walked her to her apartment, he didn't try to kiss her, just held her hand a moment longer than necessary. "I want to see you again," he said. "Tommy has a follow-up appointment Thursday." "That's not what I meant." Victoria smiled. "I know. Pick me up at 7. And Alexander? Wear the jeans." Over the next 2 months, they fell into a pattern. Dinner twice a week, sometimes fancy, sometimes not. Alexander learned Victoria's coffee order and had it delivered to the hospital every morning. Victoria learned that beneath the cold businessman exterior was a man who read to his nephew every night and anonymously funded dozens of children's charities. "Why do you hide it?" she asked one night after discovering he'd quietly paid off the medical debt of every family in the pediatric ward. "Hide what?" "Your heart. This person you are when no one's watching." Alexander was quiet for a long moment. They were at his penthouse, a place he rarely brought anyone. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the glittering Manhattan skyline, but he only had eyes for her. Because caring is weakness, and weakness gets you hurt. He turned to face her. "My foster father taught me that with his fists. My first business partner taught me that when he stole everything. My sister taught me that when she died." "So you built walls." "I built an empire, but yeah, walls too." Victoria stood and crossed to him. "What about with me?" "You terrify me," he admitted, "because with you I don't want walls." She kissed him, then soft and gentle, and Alexander felt something crack inside his chest. Later, as they lay entwined on his couch, he made a decision that would change everything. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, "about my business, about things I've done." But Victoria pressed a finger to his lips. "Not tonight. Tonight, just hold me." It was a conversation they should have had, because 3 weeks later Victoria discovered she was pregnant. And a week after that, she accidentally opened an email on Alexander's computer that revealed exactly what kind of man she'd fallen in love with. The email was about covering up toxic waste dumping at one of Knight Industries' manufacturing plants. Dozens of families sick, children with cancer. And Alexander had known, had chosen profits over people, had paid officials to look the other way. She was going to confront him. But then, the morning sickness started. Then, the ultrasound revealed twins. Then Alexander proposed in front of his entire board of directors with a ring worth more than most people's houses, and a smile that still made her heart race. She said yes. Even knowing what she knew, she said yes. Because she loved him, because she believed love could change people. Because she was already carrying his children and couldn't bear the thought of raising them alone. But she kept the evidence. Screenshots, documents, everything. Insurance, she told herself. Just in case the man she loved turned back into the monster who'd poisoned children for profit. She never imagined she'd need it until the night he threw a cake at her in front of 200 witnesses and showed her exactly who Alexander Knight really was. The silence in Le Bernardin was deafening. Alexander's face had gone from pale to furious red as his pregnant wife stood before New York's elite, covered in chocolate cake and threatening to destroy him. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. "Am I?" Victoria pulled up an email on her phone and turned the screen toward the crowd. "This is dated 3 years ago. Your signature authorizing continued operations despite knowing the contamination levels. Would you like me to read it aloud?" "Stop." The word came out strangled. "Victoria, please." "Please?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Did you say please when you threw that cake? When you humiliated me for forgetting my wallet? When you treated the woman carrying your children like she was nothing? We should discuss this privately." Alexander reached for her arm, but she stepped back. "No, you wanted to make a scene. You wanted to teach me a lesson in front of all these people. Well, consider this your lesson." She addressed the crowd again. "My husband owns Evergreen Manufacturing. 3 years ago, they dumped chemicals into the water supply of Riverside, a small town in Pennsylvania. Dozens of people got sick. Children developed cancer. And Alexander Knight knew about it." Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Several people were already recording on their phones. Alexander's board members looked like they were about to have collective heart attacks. But that's not even the worst part, Victoria continued. The worst part is what he did when families started asking questions. Should I tell them, Alexander? Or would you like to explain how you paid off investigators? How you had families threatened? How you buried reports showing contamination levels 50 times the legal limit? Enough! Alexander roared. You want to destroy me? Fine. But remember, you're destroying your children's father, their future. Everything I built was for what? For them to inherit blood money? For them to grow up thinking power means you can hurt people without consequences? Victoria's hand went protectively to her stomach. I'd rather they grow up poor with integrity than rich without souls. A woman in the crowd stepped forward. Victoria recognized her as Margaret Worthington, chair of several charitable organizations and one of New York's most influential socialites. Mrs. Knight, Margaret said carefully, these are serious allegations. Do you have proof? Everything's been uploaded to a secure cloud server. My attorney has access codes. If anything happens to me, if I disappear or have an accident or suddenly decide to retract my statements, she looked pointedly at Alexander, every major news outlet will receive copies within an hour. Alexander's hands clenched into fists. You planned this. No, I planned to love you, to raise our children together, to believe you could change. But you planned this the moment you decided to humiliate me over a forgotten wallet. The moment you showed me that your ego matters more than my dignity, more than our family. She turned back to the crowd. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, and I'll be turning over all evidence to the authorities. I kept quiet because I loved him, because I thought love could change someone. But I won't let my children grow up watching their father abuse their mother. I won't let them think this is what love looks like. Victoria. Alexander's voice broke. Please, we can talk about this. The twins deserve better. I deserve better. She wiped the last of the chocolate from her face with as much dignity as she could muster. And somewhere deep down, if there's anything left of the man who read stories to his nephew, who held my hand in that little Italian restaurant, I think you know that too. She started walking toward the exit. Each step felt like a mile. Behind her, she could hear the explosion of voices as everyone began talking at once. She'd just destroyed one of the most powerful men in New York. By morning, it would be everywhere. But as she reached the door, a hand touched her shoulder. Gentle, not grabbing. She turned to find Alexander standing there, and for a moment she saw him. Not the billionaire, not the monster, just the broken man who'd never learned how to love without hurting. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I know, she said softly. But sorry doesn't clean water, sorry doesn't cure cancer, and sorry doesn't undo what you did tonight. She left him standing there in his expensive suit covered in cake and consequences. Outside, the October air was cold against her skin, but she barely felt it. Her phone was already ringing. Lawyers, probably. Or reporters. But first, she had one more call to make. She dialed a number she'd memorized but never used. FBI tip line? My name is Dr. Victoria Chen Knight. I have evidence of corporate environmental crimes and cover-ups involving Knight Industries. I'd like to make a report. As she spoke, she felt the twins move inside her. Two little lives who would grow up knowing their mother had chosen justice over comfort, truth over luxury, love over fear. It wasn't the fairy tale she'd imagined. But maybe that's what real love looked like. Not princes and castles, but choosing to do the right thing even when it cost you everything, especially then. By morning, Victoria's phone had logged over 300 missed calls. The video of her confrontation with Alexander had gone viral. Cakegate was trending worldwide. News vans surrounded both her apartment building and Knight Industries headquarters. Victoria sat in her lawyer's office wearing borrowed clothes since photographers were camped outside her home. Eleanor Matthews, one of New York's toughest divorce attorneys, slid a stack of papers across the desk. He's offering you everything, Eleanor said with barely concealed amazement. The penthouse, the Hamptons estate, $50 million in cash, full custody, child support that would make you one of the wealthiest single mothers in America. In exchange for dropping the FBI investigation, signing an NDA, essentially disappearing. Victoria's hand went to her stomach where the twins were particularly active this morning. No. Victoria, think about this. You're 7 months pregnant with twins. Fighting him could take years. The stress alone could kill me? So could backing down. He has a history of making problems disappear, Eleanor. I won't give him the chance. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. She'd stopped answering hours ago, but something made her check this one. The message made her blood freeze. You have such a nice apartment. 3rd floor. Window facing the park. Pretty vulnerable for a woman living alone. We need to get you somewhere safe, Eleanor said, reading Victoria's face. I have a secure. The office door burst open. Alexander stood there looking like he hadn't slept. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his suit wrinkled, but it was his eyes that made Victoria's breath catch. They were wild, desperate. Call security, Eleanor commanded her assistant. Wait, Victoria stood. It's okay. Let him talk. 5 minutes, Eleanor warned. And I'm staying. Alexander barely seemed to notice the lawyer. His entire focus was on Victoria. They're not from me. The threats. I would never... He ran a hand through his hair. I've done terrible things, but I would never hurt you, or our children. Like you didn't hurt those families in Riverside? He flinched. I'm handling that. I've already set up a fund, medical bills, compensation, everything. Because you got caught. Because you made me see. He stepped closer, and Victoria saw something she'd never seen before. Tears in Alexander Knight's eyes. Last night after you left, I went to the office. I pulled up every file, every cover-up, every bribe. Do you know what I realized? I became everything I hated, everything my foster father was. A bully, a monster, someone who hurts the people they claim to love. Alexander. I threw a cake at my pregnant wife. His voice broke. In public. Because she forgot her wallet. What kind of man does that? What kind of father would I be? Victoria felt her resolve wavering. This was the Alexander she'd fallen in love with. The one who showed up at her door at 3 a.m. when she'd had a bad day, who learned to cook because she mentioned missing her grandmother's recipes, who still read to his nephew every night no matter how busy he was. People don't change overnight, she said quietly. No, but they can start. He pulled out his phone, showing her an email. I've called an emergency board meeting. I'm stepping down as CEO. Greg Harrison is taking over. He's clean, has been pushing for environmental reforms for years. I'm also turning myself in. My lawyers are meeting with the FBI tomorrow. Eleanor grabbed the phone, scanning the email. This is real. He's actually... I'm going to prison, Alexander said simply. Probably for years. But I need you to know I need our children to know that I tried to make it right. That faced with losing everything that mattered. I chose to be the man you believed I could be. Even if it's too late. The twins kicked hard and Victoria gasped. Alexander's hands moved instinctively toward her stomach before he caught himself. May I? He asked. She nodded. His large hands spread across her belly and his eyes widened as he felt his children move. They're so strong, he whispered. Like their father. The good parts anyway. He looked up at her. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. But I'm going to fight to be the father they deserve, the man you deserve, even if I have to do it from a prison cell. Mr. Knight, we need to discuss, Eleanor started. No, Victoria interrupted. We're done here. Alexander, come with me. Victoria, I don't think... Eleanor, I'm 28 years old with 2 medical degrees. I think I can decide who I talk to. She gathered her things. Alexander and I need to have a conversation, alone. They ended up in Central Park. October had turned the leaves brilliant gold and red. Victoria walked slowly, her pregnancy making her tire easily. Alexander matched her pace, carrying her bag without being asked. Tell me about the threats, she said. I'm handling it. Increased security. Private investigators. I think it's someone from Riverside. Someone who lost family. I can't blame them. You're really going to prison. My lawyers say 5 to 7 years. Maybe 3 with good behavior. They stopped at a bench overlooking the reservoir. Victoria sat heavily, grateful for the rest. Our children won't know you. They'll know I tried to be better, that when it mattered I chose them over money, over power, over everything. He sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. Victoria, what you did last night, it was the bravest thing I've ever seen. You saved me. I destroyed you. You destroyed Alexander Knight, the billionaire. But maybe that's what needed to happen for Alexander the man to survive. He was quiet for a moment. I've been in therapy. Started this morning. Dr. Peterson. She specializes in childhood trauma, anger management. I should have gone years ago. Victoria studied his profile. Without the armor of his arrogance, he looked younger, vulnerable, like the man who'd cried in a hospital waiting room over his nephew. I loved you, she said quietly. Despite everything, I loved you so much it scared me. Loved. Past tense. I don't know what I feel anymore. You threw a cake at me, Alexander. You humiliated me. You've been lying to me our entire relationship. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. But Victoria, I need you to know the marriage, it was never about control. Never about ownership. I fell in love with you the moment you kicked me out of that operating room. Everything since then has been me terrified of losing you and doing exactly the things guaranteed to make that happen. The twins moved, and without thinking, Victoria took his hand, placing it back on her stomach. They're twins, you know, a boy and a girl. Alexander's face transformed. Really? I was going to tell you at dinner, before I destroyed everything. His hand was gentle on her belly. What are we naming them? We aren't naming them anything. I'm naming them. You'll be in federal prison. Then what are you naming them? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Thomas, after your nephew, and Sarah, after your sister. Alexander made a sound like he'd been punched. His head dropped to his hands and his shoulders shook. Victoria realized he was crying, really crying. Not the controlled tears from earlier, but deep, wrenching sobs. Without thinking, she pulled him against her. He buried his face in her shoulder, his arms going around her, carefully mindful of her belly. She held him as he broke apart. This man who'd built walls so high around his heart that it had taken public humiliation and federal prosecution to bring them down. I'm sorry, he gasped between sobs. I'm so sorry. For the cake. For lying. For becoming someone who could do those things. For wasting the miracle of you loving me. Shh. Victoria stroked his hair. I know. I know. They sat that way for a long time. Him crying out years of pain and rage and fear. Her holding him and wondering if broken things could ever truly be mended, or if the cracks always remained. Finally, Alexander pulled back. His face was ravaged, but his eyes were clear, clearer than she'd ever seen them. I know I have no right to ask, but can I be there? When they're born? Even if there are guards? Even if I'm in chains? Can I at least see them? Victoria thought about the man who'd thrown cake at her, the man who'd poisoned children for profit, the man who'd built an empire on lies. Then she thought about the man who'd cried over his nephew, who'd learned to make her grandmother's soup, who'd just given up everything to try to make things right. We'll see, she said softly. We'll see. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a promise. But for now, it was enough. 2 weeks before her due date, Victoria was reviewing patient files when her water broke. She was alone. Alexander's FBI hearing was that morning, and she'd insisted he go. The twins apparently had other plans. She called an ambulance, then texted Alexander a single word: hospital. 20 minutes later, she was in active labor. The twins were coming fast, too fast. Her doctor looked concerned. Where's your birth partner? Dr. Martinez asked. I don't know. Another contraction hit, and Victoria screamed. The door burst open. Alexander stood there in his court suit, flanked by 2 federal marshals. He was in handcuffs. I'm sorry, one of the marshals said. He insisted. Said it was a medical emergency. Get these off him, Victoria gasped between contractions. He's not going anywhere. The marshals exchanged looks. The older one sighed and unlocked the cuffs. We'll be right outside. Alexander was at her side, instantly taking her hand. I'm here. I'm here. Your hearing. Postponed. Nothing matters but this. But you. He brushed hair from her face. Tell me what you need. What happened next was 12 hours of labor. Alexander never left her side. He held her hand, fed her ice chips, breathed with her through contractions. When she cried from the pain, he cried with her. When she said she couldn't do it, he told her she was the strongest person he'd ever known. "I hate you," she gasped during a particularly bad contraction. "I know. I hate me too, but you're doing amazing. I'm never letting you touch me again." Completely understandable. Now breathe. Thomas came first. 5 pounds, 8 ounces of screaming, healthy baby boy. Alexander cut the cord with shaking hands, then broke down completely when the nurse placed his son on Victoria's chest. "He's perfect," he whispered. "Look at him." Sarah followed 10 minutes later, smaller at 5 pounds, 2 ounces, but with a cry that could wake the dead. Alexander held her while the doctors tended to Victoria, his face a study in wonder. "She looks like you," he said. "Beautiful and fierce." "Let me see." Victoria reached for her daughter. Alexander carefully transferred the baby, then sat on the bed beside her. For a moment, they were just a family. Mother, father, and their newborn twins. No FBI, no scandal, no divorce. Just love and exhaustion and 2 perfect babies. "Mr. Knight," one of the marshals appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry, but 5 more minutes," Victoria said. "Please, just 5 more minutes." The marshal nodded and disappeared. Alexander memorized every detail. The way Thomas's hand wrapped around his finger, the way Sarah scrunched her nose, the way Victoria looked holding their children like a warrior goddess who'd won the ultimate battle. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his suit pocket. "For them, actually." He pulled out 2 small boxes. Inside were delicate gold bracelets engraved with the twins' names and birth date. "When did you—" "I've been carrying them for weeks. Just in case I was in custody when—" His voice broke. "I needed them to have something from me, something to remember." "Stop." Victoria reached up, touching his face. "You're their father. Nothing changes that. Not prison, not divorce, nothing." "Victoria, I need to tell you something, in case I don't get another chance." He took a breath. "I've signed everything over to you. Not just money. The legitimate businesses, the board seats, everything. Eleanor has the papers. I also recorded something, for them, for when they're older, explaining, apologizing, hoping they can forgive what I've done." Alexander. "And one more thing." He reached into another pocket, pulling out a small key. "Safety deposit box. Chase, Manhattan. Box 1247. Everything's in there. Every document, every crime. Everyone involved. I was going to give it to the FBI, but—" He pressed the key into her hand. "You should decide. You should be the one to bring them down." Victoria stared at the key. "This is everyone? Your partners? The officials you bribed?" "Everyone? Including me." He stood as the marshals returned. "I love you, Victoria. I've loved you since the moment you threw me out of your OR. I'll love you until I die. And I'll spend whatever time I have left trying to be worthy of that love. Of them. Of you." The marshals cuffed him again. Alexander looked back one last time at his family, his son, his daughter, the woman who'd saved his soul even as she destroyed his empire. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything." Then he was gone. Victoria held her babies and cried, for what was, for what could have been, for the man who'd finally learned to love just as he lost everything worth loving. But she also held that key. The power to destroy everyone who'd helped Alexander hurt innocent people. The chance to get justice not just for herself, but for all those families in Riverside. Thomas started crying, then Sarah. And Victoria did what mothers had done since the beginning of time. She fed her babies, sang to them, promised them the world, and planned her next move. The war wasn't over. If anything, it had just begun. But now she wasn't fighting alone. She had 2 tiny allies, and the ghost of the man their father could have been. It would have to be enough. 3 months later, Victoria stood in a federal courthouse surrounded by cameras. She'd lost the baby weight, but gained something harder. A edge to her eyes, a steel in her spine. The key Alexander had given her had unlocked more than a safety deposit box. It had revealed a web of corruption that went all the way to the governor's office. "Dr. Knight, do you have any comment on your husband's sentence?" "Ex-husband," she corrected. The divorce had been finalized while Alexander was in custody. "And 5 years feels appropriate given his cooperation." What about rumors that you're taking over Night Industries? No comment. She pushed through the crowd to where Eleanor waited with the twins. Thomas was fussing while Sarah slept peacefully. At 3 months, they were thriving despite their dramatic entrance to the world. Mama's here, Victoria cooed, taking Thomas. He immediately settled. How were they? Angels. Though Thomas has his father's stubborn streak. They drove to a modest brownstone in Brooklyn. Victoria had sold the penthouse and most of the luxury items. She'd kept enough to ensure the twins' education and future, but donated the rest to the Riverside Victims Fund. It felt like justice. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Victoria sat at her laptop. The FBI investigation had led to 17 arrests. CEOs, politicians, everyone Alexander had named. But there was one name not on any list. One person who'd profited from the suffering without leaving fingerprints. Marcus Chen, Victoria's brother. She'd found his name buried in encoded files, payments routed through shell companies. Her own brother had been Alexander's silent partner in the Riverside cover-up. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Alexander had done. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Victoria. Marcus. She hadn't heard his voice in 2 years. Not since she'd refused to loan him money for another failed business venture. I know you know, he continued. Alexander told me you had everything, but you didn't give the FBI my name. Why? Because I wanted to hear you say it. I wanted to hear my own brother admit he helped poison children. It was business. Alexander came to me, said he needed someone clean, someone unconnected. The money was blood money. Easy for you to say. You married rich. Some of us had to work for it. Victoria laughed bitterly. Work? You call taking bribes work? I call surviving work, but you wouldn't understand that, would you? Perfect Victoria, brilliant Victoria, the doctor who saved lives while her brother struggled to pay rent. So you decided to help destroy lives instead? I decided to take an opportunity, just like you did when you married Alexander, knowing what he was. The accusation hit home. She had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. And she'd married him anyway. The difference is I'm trying to make it right, she said. By destroying him? By taking his children? By playing the victim on national television? By telling the truth, something you should try. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What do you want, Victoria? I want you to turn yourself in. I'm giving you 48 hours. After that, I release everything. You'd do that to your own brother? My brother died the day he chose money over innocent lives. 48 hours, Marcus. Use them wisely. She hung up. Her hands were shaking. Outside, Sarah started crying, and Victoria went to comfort her daughter. As she rocked the baby, she thought about family, about loyalty, about the prices people paid for their choices. The next morning brought another surprise. A familiar car sat outside her brownstone. Margaret Worthington emerged, dressed impeccably as always. Mrs. Worthington? Miss Chen. I've been on the Night Industries board for 15 years. I've watched Alexander transform from a brilliant but ruthless young man into something worse. Until you... I didn't transform him. I exposed him. Same thing sometimes. Margaret studied her. The board meets tomorrow. We're voting on the new CEO. I want to nominate you. Victoria almost dropped her coffee. I'm a pediatric surgeon, with 2 medical degrees and a business minor, who managed to take down one of the most powerful men in New York using nothing but truth and courage, who's shown more integrity in 3 months than most executives show in a lifetime. My children would benefit from a mother who controls their father's empire rather than letting strangers do it. Think about it. Night Industries can continue being a source of harm, or under your leadership it could heal, make amends, set new standards. She left a folder. Victoria opened it after the twins' morning nap. Inside were plans, environmental cleanup proposals, healthcare initiatives, everything Alexander should have done but didn't. That night she called the prison. Alexander was allowed 1 call a week. He always used it to ask about the twins. They're perfect, she told him. Thomas is trying to roll over. Sarah discovered her feet. I dream about them, about holding them again. His voice was rough. 5 years, Victoria. They'll be in kindergarten before I know. She took a breath. The board wants me to take over Knight Industries. Silence. Then, you should do it. Alexander. I'm serious. You could fix everything I broke, make it something the twins could be proud of. Something good. I'm a doctor, not a CEO. You're the woman who brought down an empire with truth. I think you can handle board meetings. Victoria thought about Marcus, about choices, about the kind of world she wanted her children to grow up in. There's something else. My brother was involved. He's on the list, Alexander. Why didn't you tell me? Because he's your family. Because I'd already destroyed enough. Because I hoped that I'd never find out. That you'd have one less betrayal to carry. I'm sorry, Victoria. For him, too. They talked until the guard announced time was up. About the twins. About the future. About forgiveness and its limits. When she hung up, Victoria had made two decisions. She would take the CEO position, and she would give Marcus his 48 hours. Some betrayals cut too deep to forgive. But others? Maybe others could be the foundation for something better, something stronger. Time would tell. The boardroom at Knight Industries felt like a gladiator arena. 12 of New York's most powerful executives sat around a gleaming table while Victoria stood at the head wearing her one good suit and the kind of determination that had once saved lives in operating rooms. With all due respect, Miss Chen, Richard Blackstone leaned back in his chair. Running a multi-billion-dollar corporation isn't like suturing heart valves. What makes me think I can run this company? Victoria interrupted. Maybe it's because I've spent 3 months studying every financial report, every subsidiary, every decision that led to Riverside. Or maybe it's because, unlike everyone in this room, I actually care about more than stock prices. Caring doesn't pay shareholders, another board member muttered. No, but poisoning communities costs more than profits. The lawsuits alone will bankrupt us within 2 years unless we make dramatic changes. She clicked her presentation remote. Current liabilities, $847 million. Projected lawsuits, 3 billion. Stock down 40%. We're hemorrhaging talent because no one wants Riverside on their resume. So what's your solution? Margaret asked, though her small smile suggested she already knew. Complete restructuring, starting with full remediation of Riverside, medical fund for all victims, transition to clean technology across all manufacturing. Yes, it's expensive, but bankruptcy is more expensive. The board would never. The board already has. Margaret stood. I've been polling members all week. Miss Chen has the votes. The question is whether you'll support her or resign. What followed was corporate theater at its finest. Accusations, threats, 3 resignations on the spot. But when the dust settled, Victoria Chen, former pediatric surgeon and current single mother of twins, was CEO of Knight Industries. Her first call was to Alexander. You did it, he said, and she could hear the pride in his voice. I haven't done anything yet. You survived that boardroom. Trust me, that's something. He paused. How are the twins? Our twins are perfect. Sarah said her first word yesterday. Really? What was it? Victoria hesitated. Dada. The silence stretched so long she wondered if they'd been disconnected. Then she heard it. Alexander crying. I'm sending you videos, she said quickly. Eleanor worked out a way. You'll get them weekly, of the twins, so you don't miss everything. Victoria. Don't thank me. Just focus on getting better, on becoming the man they deserve to know. Her second call was to check on Marcus. He'd turned himself in with 30 minutes to spare. His lawyer said he was cooperating fully. Her third call was the hardest. She dialed a number she'd found in Alexander's files, a number that had received exactly 1 call the night of the cake incident. Dmitry Volkov. This is Victoria Chen. I know you sent the threats. Silence. I also know why. Your daughter Anya was one of the Riverside victims, 7 years old, leukemia. She died last month. His voice was flat. While your husband lived in penthouses, my baby died because of his poison. I'm sorry. That's inadequate, but I'm sorry. And I'm going to make it right. Nothing will bring her back. No, but I can make sure her death means something. I'm CEO now. I'm fixing this. All of it. Will you help me? Help you? You want my help? I want someone who understands the cost, someone who won't let me forget why this matters. I'm offering you a job, head of our new environmental compliance division. Help me ensure this never happens again." More silence. Then, "You're serious. Deadly serious. The board will hate it. The old guard will fight it. I need someone they can't intimidate. Someone with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for." A week later, Dmitry Volkov walked into Knight Industries, former Special Forces, current grieving father, future guardian of corporate conscience. The board was horrified. The old executives whispered about foxes and hen houses. Victoria didn't care. She was too busy restructuring an empire. Every morning she dropped the twins at the daycare she'd installed on the executive floor. Every evening she took them home to their brownstone. In between, she waged war on a century of corporate greed. Some battles she won. The Riverside cleanup began ahead of schedule. The medical fund exceeded projections. Stock prices stabilized as ethical investors took notice. Some battles she lost. 3 subsidiaries had to be shut down. Hundreds of jobs relocated. Profits tanked in the short term exactly as predicted. But she kept fighting. For the twins, for the families in Riverside, for the ghost of who Alexander could have been. 6 months into her tenure, something unexpected happened. She was reviewing contracts when her assistant knocked. "Miss Chen, there's a delivery for you." A courier handed her a thick envelope. Inside was a manuscript, handwritten, Alexander's writing. "My darling Victoria," the note began. "They allow us to write here. Therapy, they call it. I started writing letters to you, to the twins. They became something else. A story, maybe, or a confession. I wanted you to have it, to do with what you will. All my love, A." The manuscript was titled, "The Man Who Threw Away Everything." She started reading. About a boy broken by the system. A man built on rage. A love that came too late. A fall that came too fast. It was Alexander's story, their story, raw and honest and devastating. "Burn it," Eleanor advised when Victoria showed her. "Nothing good comes from humanizing him." "Publish it," Margaret counseled. "Show the world that even monsters can choose redemption." Victoria did neither. She put it in a safe. Someday when the twins were older, when they asked about their father, she'd let them read it. Let them decide who Alexander Knight was. Monster or man, villain or victim, father or stranger. But not today. Today she had a company to run, babies to raise, a world to change. The phone rang. Her afternoon conference call. 5 executives who still thought she was playing CEO, who believed eventually she'd break. Go back to medicine. Leave business to the men who understood it. They were wrong. Victoria Chen had discovered something in that boardroom, in the daily battles, in the small victories. She was exactly where she belonged. 5 years passed like a fever dream. Knight Industries became a case study in corporate transformation. The company that had once symbolized greed now led the industry in environmental standards. Victoria aged a decade in those years, but built something worth the sacrifice. On a cold March morning, she stood outside Rikers Island Correctional Facility. Thomas held her right hand, Sarah her left. They were 5 years old now. Thomas had Alexander's gray eyes and stubborn chin. Sarah had his brilliant mind and Victoria's fierce heart. "Is Daddy really in there?" Sarah asked for the 100th time. "Yes, sweetie. Remember what we talked about? Daddy made some bad choices and he had to go to timeout," Thomas finished. "But he's all done now?" "He's all done." The gates opened. Alexander walked out carrying a single bag. 5 years had changed him. Gray touched his temples. Lines mapped his face. But it was his eyes that were different. Clearer. Calmer. Like storm clouds finally breaking. He stopped 10 feet away, uncertain. He'd seen photos, videos, but meeting his children as walking, talking people was different. "Hi, Daddy," Sarah said simply and walked over to take his hand. "I'm Sarah. I'm 5. I can read chapter books and do multiplication, and Mama says I'm too smart for my own good." Alexander knelt to her level. "Hi, Sarah. I'm your daddy, and I think being smart is wonderful." Thomas hung back studying this stranger who looked like the man in Mama's pictures. Finally, he stepped forward. "I'm Thomas. I like dinosaurs and soccer and building things. Mama says I build just like you." "Do you?" Alexander's voice was thick. "What do you build?" "Everything. Legos, blocks. Yesterday I made a bridge out of popsicle sticks. It held Mama's coffee mug. That's amazing. Maybe you could show me sometime? Thomas considered this. Okay, but you have to follow the instructions. Sarah never follows instructions. I make improvements, Sarah protested. And just like that, the ice broke. The twins started arguing about building versus improving while Alexander looked at Victoria with wonder. They're incredible, he said. They're exhausting, she corrected, but she was smiling. Come on, let's get out of here. They drove to the brownstone. Alexander stared out the window like a tourist. 5 years was a long time. The city had changed. He'd changed. This is our house, Thomas announced as they parked. Mama says it's small but perfect. My room is blue. Sarah's is purple. Mama's is white. Where will your room be? Alexander looked at Victoria. They'd discussed this. Boundaries, separate spaces, co-parenting but not reconciliation. Too much had happened for fairy tale endings. Daddy has his own apartment, Victoria said carefully. Remember? Near the park. But he'll visit lots. Every day? Sarah asked. We'll see, Alexander said. I have to find a job first. Figure out, Mama could give you a job, Thomas suggested. She's the boss of everything. Victoria laughed. Not everything, and your father will find his own path. They spent the afternoon in tentative harmony. Alexander read to the twins, helped Thomas build a tower, listened to Sarah explain quantum physics in kindergarten terms. Victoria watched from the doorway, her heart a complicated knot of emotions. That evening, after the twins were asleep, they sat in her kitchen drinking tea. It felt surreal. The last time they'd been alone, he'd thrown a cake at her. Now they were discussing custody schedules. I meant what I said. Victoria broke the silence. You'll find your own path. I won't interfere, but I won't enable either. You need to prove you've changed. To them. To yourself. I know. I've already got interviews lined up. Teaching positions mostly. Business ethics, if you can believe it. Actually, I can. You'd be good at it. Teaching from experience. The worst kind of experience. The most valuable kind. Show them what not to do. Why it matters. Alexander studied her. You've changed too. You're harder, stronger. You took my empire and made it something good. Something clean. I've read every article, watched every interview. You did the impossible. I did what was necessary. For them, for everyone, the twins, the victims, even for you in a way. She set down her mug. I wanted them to be proud of where they came from, both parts, the mother who fought for justice and the father who chose redemption. Even after everything? Especially after everything. You're their father, Alexander, that will never change. How they see you, though, that's up to you now. He nodded. I know, and I'll earn it, every day. Every moment. I'll earn the right to be in their lives. Good. She stood. Eleanor has the custody agreement. Every other weekend to start. Wednesdays for dinner. We'll adjust as we go. Victoria, wait. He stood too. I need to say something. I've had 5 years to think about it, practice it, but... He took a breath. I'm sorry. For the cake, for the lies, for becoming someone who could hurt you. I'm sorry I wasted the miracle of your love, and I'm grateful for the videos, for today, for the chance to know them. I don't expect forgiveness. Good, because I haven't forgiven you, not yet, maybe not ever, but I've made peace with it, with you. We were both broken in our own ways. You just broke bigger. I broke everything. No, you broke yourself. I just got caught in the shrapnel, but we survived, all of us, and now we rebuild. Separately, but as family, for them. Alexander left that night with promises to return Wednesday. Victoria watched from the window as he walked away. No longer the arrogant billionaire, no longer her husband, just a man trying to earn his way back to the light. Later, Sarah padded into her room. Mama, is Daddy a good person or bad person? Victoria pulled her daughter close. People aren't just good or bad, sweetie. They're complicated. Daddy did bad things, hurt people, hurt us. But he's trying to be better. That's what matters. That we try. Did he hurt you because he didn't love us? No, baby. He hurt me because he didn't know how to love properly. Because someone hurt him first and he never learned how to heal. But he loves you and Thomas more than all the stars in the sky. Do you love him? the question she dreaded. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I love who he's becoming. And I loved who he was sometimes. It's complicated, sweetie. Grown-up love is complicated. Will you love him again? Like in movies? I don't know. Right now, I'm focused on loving you and Thomas and making sure we're all okay. The rest we'll figure out as we go. Sarah seemed satisfied with this. She snuggled closer. Mama, I'm glad Daddy came home, even if home is different now. Me too, baby. Me too. And in that moment, Victoria realized it was true. The years of single parenthood had been hard. The nights of crying babies and later worried toddlers asking where Daddy was. The exhaustion of running a company while raising twins. The loneliness of a bed that remembered love. But they'd survived. Thrived, even. And now came the harder part. Learning to be a family without being together. Teaching the twins that love could exist alongside boundaries. That forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. That sometimes the best endings weren't endings at all, just new beginnings dressed in familiar faces. Outside, Alexander walked through the city he'd once ruled. No longer a king, no longer powerful, just a father who'd thrown away everything and spent 5 years earning the right to pick up the pieces. He thought about Victoria, about the cake, about choices and consequences and the long road to redemption. Then he thought about tomorrow, about Wednesday dinner, about building blocks with Thomas and quantum physics with Sarah. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but maybe it was the life he needed, the life they all needed, broken and rebuilt, separate but whole, a family reimagined. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The twins would ask hard questions. Victoria would maintain her walls. He would fight the urge to push too hard too fast. But tonight, he had hope. For the first time in 5 years, Alexander Knight had hope. And somewhere in her brownstone, holding their daughter Victoria, had the same thought. Hope, not for reconciliation, not for fairy tales, but for something better, something real. A future built on truth instead of lies, on choice instead of chance, on the radical idea that people could change, that love could evolve, that families could be reimagined. It was enough. For now, it was enough. The end, hey listeners of Audio Horizons Tales. If you enjoyed hearing this story and want to stay in the loop with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for tuning in and see you in the next wonderful story.